Hello and welcome to 244 words that have appeared on the GRE between 10 and 40 times in a year. So this is going to be a really good list of words for you to familiarize yourself with. I'll give you the definition. I may say a few extra words about the word, and then I'm going to give you not one, but two sample sentences where that word is used in context. So you'll have a very good feel for how to use the word as well. All right, let's get started.
Abstract, existing as an idea, but not having a physical existence. So something abstract is something you can't touch or smell, or it's not physically present. It could be an idea or a concept. He loved her only in the abstract, not in person. Another example could be, he had an abstract knowledge of the law, but didn't know what being a lawyer was really like. Abstruse, hard to understand. Einstein's theory of relativity is very abstruse. Another example could be, he explains even simple concepts in the most abstruse way that is impossible to understand. So complicated, complex, esoteric is another word that means something similar. Accretion is an addition. Usually it's an addition bit by bit or layer by layer. So things are sort of building up. For example, the fund was increased by the accretion of new shareholders. Or it could be something like, layers of minerals had built up by accretion in the bottom of the bucket. Adversary. An adversary is when you have someone opposing you. It is the opponent or enemy. Someone you're fighting against or battling against somehow. For example, for the character of Batman, the Joker is an example of an adversary. Or you could have a lawyer who's facing many gifted adversaries in the courtroom, so opposing lawyers. Aesthetic. Aesthetic means concerned with beauty or the appreciation of beauty. So those buildings have little aesthetic appeal. They don't look good. They're not beautiful. Or you could say, when buying a pair of glasses, I consider the aesthetics as much as how functional they are. So the aesthetics would be the beautiful aspects of them. Ambiguity, uncertainty, or doubtfulness. An ambiguity literally means two different meanings. It has this ambi root from the Greek word for two. So an example might be, there was a lot of ambiguity in his direction, so I wasn't sure how to get there. Ambivalent. Ambivalent means uncertain or unable to decide about what course to follow. For example, after 5 days, the jury is still ambivalent about the defendant's guilt. Or you might say, I wish I could decide who to vote for, but I'm still ambivalent. So you're kind of going back and forth, you're just not sure. Amorphous, lacking definite form, having no specific shape. An example, large amorphous clouds have blocked the sunlight from reaching the earth. Or you might say, the architect had some ideas about the design of the house, but they were still amorphous. So you could even say the ideas haven't taken shape, so to speak. Anachronism. An anachronism is something or someone that's not quite in the right place in history, wrong period in history. It might belong to the past rather than the present, or vice versa. For example, in today's computer world, a floppy disk is an anachronism. Or when they made the movie about World War II, some of the soldiers' language was anachronistic, so it didn't fit the time. Anomalous. Anomalous means abnormal, deviating from the normal. Researchers could not explain the anomalous test results. So you're used to something else and it's sort of a freak occurrence. Or you might say, gorillas are generally peaceful, although there have been some anomalous reports of them attacking humans. So unusual, not what you're normally going to expect. Anticipated just means expected or predicted. Or you could say in the verb to expect or predict. So the organizers anticipated a successful event. They expected it. Or you could say more people showed up to my party than I had anticipated. Apparent. Apparent means clearly visible or obvious. For example, the effects of the drought are apparent to anyone who sees the parched fields. Or, taking the sleeping pills had no apparent effect on me. Approbation. Approbation is official recognition or approval. He managed to get the approbation from the city mayor. Or, he was a very well-behaved student and always received the approbation of his teachers. Arbitrary. Arbitrary means just random, based on random choice or personal desire, rather than any reason or logic. For example, despite being sensitive to cold temperature, he made an arbitrary decision to visit Antarctica. No rhyme or reason. Or you might say, the sergeant in the platoon chose a soldier arbitrarily, or made an arbitrary decision about what soldier to choose. Arcane. Arcane means known or understood by very few, or mysterious or secret. For example, Mr. Allen had a very arcane way of teaching mathematics. Or, I was impressed by my professor's arcane knowledge of ancient Greece. So that would be knowledge that a lot of people don't have. Archaic. That means old, ancient, obsolete. For example, because my archaic computer is no longer useful to me, I'm giving it away for free. Or, we walked around the archaic ruins of the temple. Assertion. It's an insisting or defending. The lawyer was correct in his assertion that the minister had been lying. So it's a statement. Or, I could see no basis for the policeman's assertion that the criminal was guilty. Assiduity. Devoted attention or strong focus and determination. I marvel at the assiduity with which she completes her projects. Or, he pays attention to the grammar of his students with great assiduity. Atypical, not common, uncommon, or not typical. A means not in front of, usually or often in front of a word, A means not. So not typical. Eating meat would be completely atypical for a vegetarian. Or there were sometimes atypical side effects to the drugs, so not what you'd normally see. Augment. Augment means to enlarge or increase, or sometimes make better. He augmented his summer income by painting houses. So he had some income, but he added to it by painting the houses. Or you might say, you could augment your argument by including more facts. So you're kind of increasing it, making it better, or making it stronger. Austere, severe or strict in manner or attitude. Even though my teacher appeared austere, she was a very kind woman. Or the austere manner of the judge intimidated everybody. Averse. Averse means having a strong dislike to something. Since my children are averse to broccoli, I have to hide the vegetable in their favorite dishes. Or you might say, he was averse to riding in planes, so we had to drive the whole way. He didn't like it. Belie is to give a false impression. His gentleness belied his evil nature. So he seems gentle, but he's actually evil. Or your packed suitcases belie your statement that you plan on staying. So it's like it goes against something, the appearance of something. Benign, having no harmful effect, pleasant and kind. The officer was kind and benign. Or his older brother had a benign effect on him, teaching him many things. Bolster, support and strengthen. This could bolster something physically or more abstractly. For instance, the UN is sending more troops to bolster the peacekeepers. Or I appreciate your attempts to bolster my confidence. A boon. A boon is a benefit or blessing for which one should be grateful. The donation from the billionaire was a nice boon for the homeless charity. Or, I believe the baseball stadium will be a great boon to the city. Brevity. Brevity is conciseness and exact use of words in writing or speech. So you're being as short as possible. The president made his points with praiseworthy brevity. Or you might say, you should speak with more brevity in order not to bore your listeners. Camouflage. To hide or disguise by blending in with the surroundings. The troops camouflage themselves before they go into the enemy's territory. Or the color of the lizard's skin camouflaged it against the tree bark so that birds couldn't see it. Capricious. Capricious means someone or something that's subject to sudden, unpredictable changes. We sometimes say you do things on a whim is another word that's similar to capricious. He took a capricious decision and left his successful career as a poker player. Or he was a poor leader and made capricious decisions that made no sense. Cavalier. That means not caring about feelings or serious situations, just being kind of casual. For instance, since Alan had a cavalier attitude when he proposed, I didn't take him seriously at all. Or he had a cavalier attitude to proofreading his essays and often submitted them with many mistakes. So not taking things seriously. Casual. Circuitous. Not straight or direct. Roundabout. We took a circuitous route to school and missed the class. It could also be something like an argument. So, for example, his argument was circuitous, but he eventually conveyed that he was right. Circumspect. Careful not to take risks. She is very circumspect in dealing with strangers. Now, it also means sort of keeping a low profile. please go into the class to see what is wrong, but try to be circumspect when you talk to people. So just be careful, low key. Circumvent, to avoid, defeat, failure, unpleasantness, etc., by artfulness or deception. Ships were registered abroad to circumvent the heavy local taxes. Or, he did not feel the rules applied to him and would always try to circumvent them. Clandestine. That means kept secret or done secretively, especially because it's illegal or immoral. For example, some of the prison inmates have developed clandestine procedures for selling drugs. Or the government must often act in clandestine ways in order to pursue its interests. Compelling, very exciting and interesting. It really engages you. The novel was so compelling that I couldn't put it down. Or you might say, he did not make a very compelling argument, and I disagreed. Conciliatory. This means intended to show that you care about the feelings or opinions of someone who is angry or upset with you. So you're trying to make up with them. The mediator made a conciliatory statement that helped the two parties find common ground. Or, though we had argued the previous day, she showed up in a conciliatory mood and we got along just fine. Confound. Confound is to confuse someone by being difficult to explain or deal with. The complex puzzle will confound even the most intelligent person. Or the difficult homework problems would often confound me. Conscientious. This means feeling a moral responsibility to do your work carefully and be fair to others. Matt is a conscientious teacher, helping each and every student in the class with English grammar. Or, he was a conscientious employee and rarely made any mistakes. Consensus. A consensus is a generally accepted opinion, general agreement among a group of people. So you've come together and reached a consensus. The leadership team is skilled at achieving consensus on sensitive issues. Or, the jury finally reached a consensus and found the defendant innocent. Consequential, important or significant. She made some wrong investments and suffered a consequential loss of earnings. So having important ramifications. You could say he made a consequential decision to take the job and ended up having a great time. So whatever you did had important consequences. Conspicuous, clearly visible or completely obvious. There were a number of conspicuous changes to the building, so very noticeable. Or he had a conspicuous scar right across his face. Hard to miss that. Convolute. That's to form into a twisted shape. My head began to hurt as I heard the professor's convoluted talk. I tried to follow the convoluted instructions, but kept getting lost. Corroborate. This means to confirm or verify or endorse. Even though she knew her husband was lying, Meredith still agreed to corroborate his story in court. You often hear this word in legal contexts, like there was no corroborating evidence to support his story. Coy means having a shy or sweetly innocent quality that's often intended to get attention. The boy batted his eyes in a coy manner, as if he was trying to get the attention of his mom. Or, no one's ever been that nice to me before, she said coyly. Crust, a hard outer layer that covers something. Bake until the crust is golden. Or, the mud had dried into a flaky crust. Cumulative, something that is increasing or getting bigger with more additions. So this is kind of similar to a word we saw before, which was accretion. The state's cumulative coronavirus cases rose to 726,716. Or the cumulative hours of practice finally paid off in his brilliant performance. So building up over time. Cursory. This means rapidly or not thorough and not paying attention to detail. He signed with only a cursory glance at the report. Or let's say, they concluded he was innocent after a cursory investigation. So not paying too much attention, just kind of trying to get it out of the way. Cynical. Cynical means believing the worst of human nature and motives, negative or pessimistic. The cynical woman did not believe a word the boy told her. Or we could say, it's cynical to believe that every politician is a crook. Daunting. Daunting is something like a task that appears challenging or makes you afraid or gives you pause. If you have never done skydiving, it might appear somewhat daunting to you. Or, painting that house all by myself is a daunting task. Dearth. A dearth is a scarcity or lack of something, so there's not much of it. Many children died because of the dearth of food. Or, there is a dearth of good movies this summer. Not many of them. Hard to find. Deceptive. Deceptive is giving the impression that's different from the true one. You're being misleading. The look on Luke's face led me to believe that he was being deceptive. Or, during the battle, the general employed deceptive tactics to make the enemy think he was attacking from a different direction. Defensible. Justifiable by argument, able to be protected. So either way, you're defending something. You can stick up for it if it's an argument, or you can physically protect it if it's something physical. A city built on an island is easily defensible. Or the argument you make is not defensible, since there are many facts to the contrary. Deliberate. Done intentionally, careful, and unhurried. So you're taking your time, really make sure it's working, so to speak. After losing my job, I had to be deliberate about selling my house. Or, he took deliberate steps to make sure the projects were completed on time. Demeanor. Your demeanor is how you look or come across, so your conduct, facial appearance, behavior. Jack's disruptive demeanor got him kicked out of school for a week. Or, she had a cheerful demeanor and I liked her instantly. Derived. This means dependent on or generated by something more basic, not original. So it's coming from somewhere else. AI techniques are methods that use derived knowledge to perform efficiently. Or it could be something more physical, like this fuel is derived from plants. It comes from them. Detrimental simply means causing harm or injury. It's not good for you or something. For example, smoking is detrimental to your health. Or, I think giving that speech will be detrimental to the politician's campaign. It will harm it. Devoid, lacking or free from. So if A is devoid of B, that means A does not have any B in it. For example, the food was completely devoid of taste. Or you could say, I found the book completely devoid of any entertainment value. Diffident. Diffident means lacking in self-confidence or shyness or modesty. Amy is a diffident but intelligent kid. Or, I always acted diffidently in front of my teachers, but I was completely different with my friends. So I acted shy and insecure around my teachers, but I was different with my friends. Discretion. Discretion is the freedom to decide what should be done in a certain situation. So if you have discretion, that means it's up to you. For example, medicines will be given out to students at the nurse's discretion. Or you could say, how much homework to assign was left up to the teacher's discretion. So the teacher decided in that case. Disdain. Disdain is the feeling of not liking someone or something and thinking that they don't deserve your interest or respect, sort of looking down on. She turned her head away in disdain. Or you might say, she seemed to have disdain for the rules and did whatever she felt like. Disingenuous. Disingenuous means dishonest or not speaking the complete truth. The sad reality of the present era is that almost everybody is disingenuous, even to their friends. Well, I hope that's not true, but that's an example. Or you could say, I believe her arguments were disingenuous and she was just being selfish. So she's trying to sort of mask the true motives in that case. Disparate. Disparate means fundamentally different or distinct in quality or kind. For example, you can't compare both the vehicles. They have disparate features, so different types of feature. Or you might say, he made a sculpture by collecting disparate pieces of old wood and other objects. Disseminate. To disseminate is to spread widely, often information. For example, the aim is to disseminate messages as widely as possible within a given community. Or the government tried to disseminate its propaganda by putting up posters in the city. So you're spreading the word. Distort. To distort is to mislead or give a false impression. The funhouse mirror was designed to distort the visage of anyone who stood in front of it. Visage means face. Or you could say, she distorted the facts and made it look like the campaign had been successful. Diverse. Diverse means different or showing a lot of variety. Our diverse student body includes individuals from different countries. Or the Amazon jungle contains a diverse group of plants, many different kinds. Dubious. Open to doubt or suspicion, doubtful or uncertain. In such a crazy world, it's hard not to be dubious of a stranger's intentions, so you're wondering about them. Or you might say, He said the car was a great deal, but I was dubious and wanted to get a second opinion. Duplicity. Duplicity is fraud, dishonest talk, or behavior. Basically, it's being fake. They were accused of duplicity in their dealings with both sides. Or, I do not appreciate her duplicity and no longer want to be friends. Eccentric. Eccentric means unconventional, strange, or unusual, sometimes in a humorous way. He is an eccentric character who likes wearing a beret and dark glasses. So you sort of stick out in the crowd, or sort of, quote, weird. Another example might be, many artists are eccentric in their behavior. Eclectic. Eclectic means deriving ideas, style, or taste from a broad and diverse range of sources. In Gerald's library, you will find an eclectic mix of books because he will read just about anything. Or you might say, she has eclectic interests ranging from tennis to poetry. Eclipse. The phenomenon when something blocks the view of something else, making it less important and noticeable. So this could be in a physical way, as in the moon eclipses the Earth's view of the sun, so it physically gets in the way. Or it could be metaphorically. She is concerned that her sister's accomplishments will eclipse her own. So she's concerned her own accomplishments will be blocked out or not noticed because her sisters are more impressive, say. Edifying. Something that's edifying is instructive or beneficial, especially morally or spiritually. For example, the paintings in the church served an edifying purpose, even for those who could not read. Or, I found reading the encyclopedia to be very edifying, so it helped me. Egalitarian, favoring social equality. People have long dreamt of an egalitarian society, so everyone's treated equally, given equal chances. Or he has a very egalitarian view of education and wants to make sure even the poorest people receive training. Elucidate. To elucidate is to make something clear or just explain. For example, the aim of the report is to elucidate the main points of the new regulations. Or, I found his lecture fascinating and asked him to elucidate several of the topics he touched on. Elusive. Elusive is difficult to find, catch, or achieve. Hard to see, hard to get. Peace becomes elusive in a house full of noisy children. Or it could be more physical and here and now, as in, we chased the coyote, but it was too elusive and got away. So that's a more physical way of using the word. Embellish. Make more attractive by adding ornament or color, etc. We embellished our room with a new rug, lamp, and a chair. Now, you can also embellish abstract things, like, I think she embellished her story to make it more exciting. So she added interesting elements to it, or exciting things. Embrace. To embrace is to accept willingly or hold closely in one's arms. So again, this can be abstractly or physically. An abstract sentence or an abstract usage of the word would be, charity embraces all acts that contribute to human welfare. Or you might say, she embraced me warmly when I arrived, so she literally embraced me. Empirical. Derived from experiment and observation rather than theory. There is no empirical evidence to support his thesis. So it needs to be something you can see or somehow experience out in the world. So you could say scientists have to be empirical and pay attention to the data. Enamored, in love with a person or thing. She is truly enamored with Turkish delights. She loves them. Or he was enamored with the beautiful waitress. Engrossing. Engrossing is taking all your attention. You find it very interesting, fascinating. You're completely caught up in it. I find the Harry Potter series totally engrossing. Or her lectures were always engrossing and students crowded around her afterwards with questions. Ephemeral. Ephemeral means short-lived or temporary, just passing quickly. The thunderstorm was ephemeral, starting suddenly and gone within seconds. Or the effects of the drugs on his mood were ephemeral, only lasted a short time. Epitomize. If A epitomizes B, it means A is a perfect example of B, or sort of represents B in its essence. Stressing one night before the exam epitomizes the struggles of university life. Or her kindness and generosity epitomizes the spirit of her charitable organization. Equivocal. Equivocal is not clear or certain, of doubtful nature or character, questionable, dubious, suspicious. The results of the police inquiry were equivocal, so you can't really decide. Or the mayor's response at the press conference was so equivocal, no one knew where he stood on the issue. Erratic. Erratic is like all over the place, not regular in pattern or movement, unpredictable. Consuming alcohol causes erratic behavior. Or the cop pulled her over because of her erratic driving, so maybe she was weaving around. Erudite. Erudite means having or showing profound knowledge. Ken could turn any conversation into an erudite discussion. Or the literary scholar was so erudite, no one dared talk to her. Eschew. To eschew is to avoid or stay away deliberately from something, to stay clear of it. I eschew smoking because I know it's dangerous to my health. Or he eschewed sports ever since he injured his knee. So you're just staying away from it. Esoteric. Esoteric is sort of connected to erudite, which we just saw. It means known or understood by very few people. Ruling an entire kingdom successfully is an esoteric business known by only a few kings. Or the mystic had esoteric knowledge of the secrets of his religion. Exacerbate. Exacerbate means to make worse. Interfering in the already heated debate would further exacerbate the situation. Or sometimes scratching an itch just exacerbates the discomfort, makes it worse. Exaggerate. To exaggerate is to show something larger, better, or worse than it really is, so just make it more extreme. He tends to exaggerate the difficulties. He makes them seem bigger than they are. Or you don't need to exaggerate your qualifications to get the job. Exemplary. If you're exemplary, you are really good at something. So it means something so good that it is an example for others to follow. That's where the word comes from. Married for over 50 years, my grandparents have an exemplary marriage. Or, the soldier was rewarded for his exemplary service. Exhaustive, including all aspects, complete. My wife's exhaustive cleaning list covers every inch of the house, so nothing left out, gets it all. You could also say, she conducted an exhaustive study of the mating habits of elephants, covered all the details. Exotic, of foreign character or origin, not native. I love trying exotic food. So something you're not used to from some distant land usually. Or I have visited many exotic lands on my travels. Expedient. This is a description of something that provides an easy way to achieve a goal or result, but it's not necessarily a moral solution. So you're just taking care of it without maybe being thorough or totally above board. For example, an expedient solution for getting good grades without studying is to cheat. So quick and easy. Or you might say, the official will do whatever is expedient, including overlooking certain rules. Expeditious, done with speed and efficiency. Everybody expects a pizza delivery boy to be expeditious. Or, I appreciate your expeditious treatment of my father's application. Extraneous, irrelevant or unrelated. Extraneous light in the camera spoiled the photograph. So it was extra. There's that word extra kind of hiding in there, right? Or you could say, I tried to keep all extraneous matters out of my mind when I focused on my work. Fecund, intellectually productive or inventive. It means kind of rich, right? So gives rise or sort of, quote, gives birth to a lot. He is a fecund young scientist with so many inventions. Or you could have a fecund imagination, always telling crazy stories. Flout. To flout is to intentionally disobey a rule or law. Many motorcyclists flout the law by not wearing helmets. Or, none of the men dared to flout the authority of their leader. Forbearance. Forbearance is patient self-control or tolerance, so you're willing to put up with things. The teacher exhibited great forbearance when the children started misbehaving in class. Another example, the soldiers showed great forbearance, enduring many hardships during the campaign. Forestall. To forestall something is to act in advance to prevent something. So that prefix for can mean ahead of time, and you're sort of stalling it ahead of time. You could think of it that way. For example, fortunately, at the last minute, Sarah was able to talk to the two colleagues and forestall a fight. So she got out ahead of it, and a fight did not happen. Or you could say, in order to forestall any problems, I'd like to plan ahead. Formidable. Formidable means causing fear, dread, or just extremely difficult to defeat, overcome, or manage. So it's something big in front of you. The formidable hurricane lasted for 30 hours and destroyed every house on the island. Another example, the boxer knew his opponent would be formidable and trained extra hard. Forthright. Direct and outspoken. So you're just upfront and honest and direct. His forthright manner can be mistaken for rudeness. Or the child was forthright and admitted his guilt. Fortuitous. Fortuitous means occurring by happy chance. So it just happened to happen, and it's a good thing. His success is the result of a fortuitous combination of circumstances. So things just kind of came together by chance, and it caused his success. Another example. The arrival of the taxi was fortuitous because I was just about to call one. Foster. To encourage or promote something. You cannot foster a relationship if one party is unwilling to cooperate. Or, in order to foster good values in students, we must show them good examples. So we're encouraging those things that we foster. Fragile. Easily broken, damaged, or destroyed. And this can be something abstract, like her health has always been very fragile, or something very physical, like that's a fragile vase, please be careful. Fraught. Fraught means marked by distress or difficulty. Their marriage has been fraught with difficulties. Or the road through the forest was fraught with danger. Gauge, to estimate or measure. The device will gauge your blood pressure throughout your surgery. Or you could say, it's hard to gauge how bad the weather will be tomorrow. Germane, relevant and appropriate. He asked questions that are germane and central to the issue. Or, I will only take questions that are germane to the topic. Glimpse, a brief look at someone or something. Using my long-distance lens, I was able to catch a glimpse of the celebrity. So you don't get to look for very long, it's quick, a brief glimpse. Out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed something approaching quickly. Hackneyed. Repeated too often, overused. So it's sort of like a cliche, you may have heard that word. Since dyeing her hair, purple has become a hackneyed style. I am dyeing my hair green. Or the movie was full of hackneyed dialogue and plot twists, the kind of thing you've seen before. Heterogeneous, consisting of elements that are not of the same kind or nature. Diverse is another synonym for that, or a close word. The population of the United States is vast and heterogeneous. Or the neighborhood I come from is a heterogeneous mixture of different ethnicities. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is exaggeration or overstatement in order to evoke strong feelings. The politician uses hyperbole in his speech to gain public support. So he's exaggerating things, going over the top. Or it could be used, it is no hyperbole to say that he is the fastest runner in the world. Okay, so in that case, he would be the fastest runner in the world. Hypothesis. A hypothesis is an expression of an opinion based on incomplete evidence. So we hope that further research will confirm our hypothesis. Or you could say, I have a very interesting hypothesis that I want to test. Idiosyncratic. This means having strange or unusual habits or ways of behaving or features. Sarah has an idiosyncratic habit of collecting toddler toys in her 20s. Or the professor's idiosyncratic way of speaking only made his lectures more interesting. So he has sort of an unusual way of speaking. Imminent, likely to occur at any moment. Despite what the scientists said, the volcano eruption is not imminent. Or, based on the dark color of the sky, I would say rain is imminent. I'm expecting it very soon. Impartial. If you are impartial, you don't show any favoritism. You're neutral. The impartial moderator managed the debate and did not show favoritism to either politician. Or we could say judges in courts are supposed to be impartial. They should not be biased. Imperative. Imperative means necessary or unavoidable or crucial, you could say. There is an ethical imperative not to destroy the wonderful diversity of life on Earth. Or, it is imperative that you study hard before a test in order to succeed. Imperceptible. This word it sort of looks like perceive. That word perceive is sort of hiding in there. So imperceptible is not able to be to be perceived, unable to be noticed or felt, and this is because of it being very slight. His head moved in an almost imperceptible nod. You could barely see it. Another example, the snail had moved an imperceptible distance. Imperious. Imperious is arrogance with an attitude of authority and expecting obedience. The professor was as imperious as ever. Or, the general intimidated everyone with his imperious glares. Impervious. This means not allowing fluid to pass through, but it could mean not allowing anything to pass through. It could be used more in the abstract. So the more immediate physical example would be something like rubber boots are impervious to water. But I could also be very confident and impervious to criticism, so I don't let criticism get to me or flow through me. Implausible. This means unlikely or questionable. For example, even though I dream of winning the lottery, I know the odds of winning are highly implausible, or I know that event would be implausible. Another example, he had what seemed to me like an implausible plan to rob the bank, so I didn't think it was going to work. Implication. The conclusion that can be drawn without being explicitly stated. So what I say causes you to think something, but it doesn't lead you explicitly to that conclusion. For instance, the belt in my father's hand was a clear implication that I was in trouble. It suggests it. I am offended at your implication that I have been selfish. So you didn't exactly say I've been selfish, but it's an implication in your words. Inconsequential. Lacking worth or importance. Having no consequence, you could say. For example, at the end of the day, everything is inconsequential except one's family. Or, what other people think of you is inconsequential if you have faith in yourself. So it doesn't matter. Inconsistent. Displaying a lack of consistency. So inconsistent is just literally not consistent. The jury was turned off by the witness's inconsistent testimony. So it contradicted itself. Another example. His training was inconsistent, and so he could not make steady progress. Indifference. Indifference is lack of concern or interest. You don't care one way or the other. Depression added to the man's indifference and caused him to care less and less about things he had once loved and enjoyed. Or you could say, he was saddened by the indifference of his wife with regard to his interests. Indigenous. This means originating where it is found. So it comes from the place it is, where it now is. The Ainu are indigenous to the northernmost islands of Japan. That's where they are from. That's where they came from and live. Or there were many indigenous people present in America when the Europeans arrived. Indiscernible. Difficult or impossible to perceive or discern. So not discernible. Because it was so dark outside, the faces of the people that stood outside my door were indiscernible. Or he made an indiscernible mark on the paper and handed it to me, expecting me to be able to read it. Indispensable. Absolutely necessary, vitally necessary. So you have to have this thing in order to accomplish whatever you're doing. For instance, sleep and exercise are indispensable to good health. Or, I find voice dictation to be indispensable when I am brainstorming. I really like it. It's absolutely necessary. Inert. Unable to move or resist motion. He covered the inert body with a blanket. Or, after hours of lying in the sun, the dog remained inert, refusing to move. Inevitable. Incapable of being avoided or prevented. So it's definitely going to happen. A rise in the interest rates seems inevitable. Another example. It is inevitable that you will succeed if you keep trying. It's bound to happen. Inexplicable. This means not being able to be explained or accounted for. So again, we have that prefix in, meaning not explainable, inexplicable. For example, he left the house at 3 a.m. for inexplicable reasons. Or, his marriage to the woman was inexplicable as she was cruel and selfish. Ingenuous. It means lacking in sophistication or worldliness, sort of like innocent in a way. The little boy's ingenuous habit of constantly telling the truth made him unpopular at school. Or, I was told he was manipulative, but I found him completely ingenuous. Inimical, causing harm or injury, or going against something in a way. The police officer had an inimical attitude towards criminals. Or, the conditions on Mars are most likely inimical to life. Innocuous, not harmful or offensive, or sometimes strong, not strong. He's a perfectly innocuous young man, so perfectly harmless. Another example might be, she told me it was a strong drink, but I found it completely innocuous. Inscrutable. Impossible to understand or interpret. The inscrutable gaze of the palace guards made me a little nervous. Or, I wondered how she felt, but her face was an inscrutable mask. Insular. Often it's a community, and it's something that remains separate from others and doesn't wish to learn about other cultures or anything outside of it. For example, only a few people live in their insular neighborhood in the coldest part of Alaska. Or, he has lived a largely insular life, never having left the town he grew up in. Intractable. not easily managed or controlled. Bringing up the sunken cruise ship is going to be an intractable task. Or, I dreaded babysitting Charlie because he was an intractable boy. Hard to control. Intransigent, uncompromising. You're not going to back down. People have a hard time getting along with Ben because he is such an intransigent leader. Another example could be, despite prolonged negotiations, the union was intransient and refused to budge on its demands. Intricate. Having many complexly arranged elements, elaborate. Or it could be like very, very detailed, lots of little things going on. The painter's work of art reveals his ability to create intricate pictures of hometown life on canvas. Or, he has intricate plans that always astound me. Intrigue. Intrigue is to cause to be interested or curious. Fairy tales can intrigue most children. Or, I found his theory very intriguing and wanted to know more. Irascible. That means quickly aroused to anger. He was recognized to be highly jealous and irascible. Or, our math teacher was a cruel and irascible old man. So kind of grouchy in a way. Irrelevant. Irrelevant is having no connection with something. His answer seemed irrelevant at first, so nothing to do with with the subject at hand. Another example, please don't ask irrelevant questions since we have to stay focused. So don't go off topic. Irreverent, showing lack of due respect. When the knight did not bow before his queen, he acted in an irreverent manner. Or, the young man was often punished for his irreverent behavior. Itinerant, a person who travels from place to place, often as demanded by employment. Ilana's book discusses the itinerant life she has lived as a gypsy. Or, he was an itinerant crop worker and would travel to wherever he was needed. Lackadaisical, lacking enthusiasm or determination, carelessly lazy. Ben is annoyingly lackadaisical and impractical by sleeping and watching television all day. Or, he has a lackadaisical attitude towards his work as a security guard and often leaves his post. So, just kind of doesn't care, casual. Lucid. Lucid means transparently clear, easily understandable. Even though he was drunk, Harry insisted he was lucid and capable of driving home. Or, he gave a lucid account of the incident, so very clear and graphic, easy to follow. Malleable. Malleable means capable of being shaped or bent without cracking. Silver is the most malleable of all metals. Or, we could say of something more abstract, like, his character is quite malleable, as he will try to please whoever he's with. Manifest, to make clear or evident to the eye, so to appear or be obvious. The love on Amy's face was manifest and obvious to everyone. Or, his manifest enthusiasm infected the whole group. Meager. Meager is lacking in amount or quality, so not much of something. Dean kept quiet about his meager half-breakfast, very small. Or he accepted the meager pay because it was his only means of income. Mediocrity. Mediocrity is a noun that means of moderate ability or value, or something that has moderate ability or value. So Jan lived a life of mediocrity, didn't do anything sort of special or impressive, very plain. Or mediocrity was never good enough for her and she always tried her hardest. Meticulous. Meticulous means showing great attention to detail, very careful. She inspected the house in meticulous detail. Or the artist's meticulous attention to his final creation makes every work a joy to behold. Mitigate. To make less severe or serious. Nothing could mitigate the loss of her husband. Another example, although he lost his job, the effects on the family were mitigated by the income of his wife. So they were made a little less serious. Morose, showing a brooding ill humor. Her face suddenly took on a morose expression, so very sad. Or, after the relationship ended, she became morose for several weeks. Mundane, lacking interest or excitement, dull. Or you could say like everyday kind of things. For example, it was hard to return to a mundane 9-to-5 job after vacations, just the daily grind. Another example, life is richer when we do even the most mundane tasks with joy. Naivete. This means a lack of sophistication, experience, wisdom, or judgment. For example, smugglers rely on the naivete of inexperienced travelers to get their goods through customs. Another example, the naivete of the new teacher was obvious to all the students who took full advantage. Nebulous, not clear, vague, ill-defined. For example, he has a few nebulous ideas about what he might like to do in the future, but nothing definite, so it's unclear. Or, her memories of that day were nebulous and faded into a blur of emotions and vague images. Noisome. It looks like the word noise, but it actually means an extremely unpleasant smell. The homeless man had a noisome odor because he has not showered in months. Or, the garbage had been left out for days, filling the alley with a noisome stench. Obscure. To obscure something is to make it less visible or unclear. So the big elm trees obscures our view of the alley. So you see, in that case, it's physically blocking it or making it less visible. But it can also be used more in the abstract, like, don't let her rude manner obscure your appreciation of her brilliance. So in that case, her rudeness is sort of metaphorically blocking the view of her brilliance. Obviate. This means to prevent the occurrence of or just prevent from happening. So we must obviate the problem ahead of tomorrow. We're getting ahead of it. Or the new safety measures were meant to obviate the need for further inspections. So prevent. Ominous. Giving the worrying impression that something bad is going to happen. There was an ominous silence in the house. Or the ominous storm clouds on the horizon meant rain would be coming soon. Onerous. This is usually used for a task or responsibility that involves a great deal of effort, trouble, or difficulty. So you would not be looking forward to something onerous. The flight attendant was not prepared to deal with the onerous passenger. Or he had the onerous task of cleaning out the stables. Orthodox. This means adhering to what is commonly accepted. It's like the official way of doing things or looking at things. The minister called me an upstart when I dared to question his orthodox views. Or, his methods are not orthodox, but they get the job done. So he's not following this sort of official way of doing it, but he's getting it done. Outmoded. This means out of fashion or just outdated, no longer current. Outmoded computers are not used nowadays. We might say this about language. Her overly formal way of talking to people is outmoded. We don't do it anymore. Paradigm. A paradigm is like a generally accepted perspective on a particular discipline or situation at a given time. So it's like a way of viewing things, a framework for how you view something. For example, he framed the problem within the psychoanalytic paradigm. Another example might be, we need to look at the problem within a new paradigm to find a solution. Paradox. This is a statement that contradicts itself, or it could just be appears to contradict itself. For example, I always lie is a paradox because if it's true, it must be false. Or, it seems like a paradox that the slower you do something, the more you get done. Parochial. This means having a limited or narrow outlook or scope. Local newspapers tend to be very parochial. Or, when he came to the big city, he was mocked for his parochial ways. Parsimonious. This means unwilling to spend money or use resources. So another synonym here would be stingy. Most rich people remain rich by employing parsimonious habits. Or, my father was very parsimonious and always made us turn off the lights when we left our room to save on electricity. Paucity, an insufficient quantity or number. I did not have enough to drink because Sally left only a paucity of soda in the bottle. Or, there is a paucity of qualified workers in this city. Pedestrian. This could be either a person who travels by foot or lacking inspiration or excitement, dull. So notice the first case, it's a noun, a person who walks by foot. That word ped means, or that part of the word ped means foot. But it can also be an adjective which describes something as lacking inspiration. So the noun form, an example would be, the speeding car barely missed the pedestrian. Or we could say in the second definition, after playing on stage, it was always difficult for him to adjust to his more pedestrian life. Perfunctory. This means hasty and without paying attention to detail, not thorough. Since I was extremely ill, I was shocked when the doctor only gave me a perfunctory exam. Or, he looked at the recruit with a perfunctory glance and deemed him unfit for service. Peripatetic, traveling, especially on foot. I haven't been able to train my dog to stop his peripatetic behavior of running away in search of adventure. Or, his peripatetic lifestyle meant he rarely slept in the same place twice. Pernicious, exceedingly harmful. Kind of sounds like vicious. It's not the same, but it might help you remember that. Because she hates me, my neighbor is always spreading pernicious lies about me. Or, the pernicious spread of misinformation online has caused much unnecessary anxiety in our culture. Perpetuate. This means to cause to continue or prevail. Schools tend to perpetuate the myth that boys are better at sports than girls, so they keep it going. Or, I did not want to perpetuate the lie anymore and finally told my father the truth. Perspicacity. The ability to understand things quickly and make accurate judgments. He has the perspicacity and persistence to solve almost any problem. Or, I admire the perspicacity of his mind, especially when it comes to solving problems. Pervasive, especially of an unwelcome influence or physical effect, spreading widely throughout an area or a group of people. So we could say widespread. Violence and crime are pervasive features of city life. Or, there is a pervasive idea in the culture that struggle is noble. Plausible. This means apparently reasonable, valid, or truthful. For example, Jamie was fired because she could not give her boss a plausible explanation for coming late every other day. So she could not give her boss an explanation that sounded reasonable to him or true. Another example, I'm afraid your explanation is not plausible because it does not take into account many of the known facts. Poignant, evoking a keen sense of sadness or regret. Her face was a poignant reminder of the passing of time. Or, the ending of the movie was extremely poignant and made almost everybody cry. Polemical. This means of or involving dispute or controversy. For example, they are the polemical opponents of theory. Or, the two men could not be on stage without becoming polemical about their different views. Ponderous. This means labored and dull, usually of writing and speech, or slow and clumsy because of great weight. So you could be moving in a ponderous way if you're very heavy, or an animal was very heavy, sort of lumbering along. For example, John quickly fell asleep while reading the ponderous book. Or, I find his lecturing style ponderous, which makes it very hard to pay attention. Pragmatism is a practical approach to problems and affairs. So whatever gets the job done, whatever works. We live in a civilized age, and it demands a new pragmatism. Or, I admire his pragmatism in solving problems. Precarious, not securely held or in position, or dangerously likely to fall or collapse. My financial position is rather precarious at the moment. Or, he was in the precarious position of trying to please both his wife and his mother. You could also, something could be physically precarious, like he set the glass on the edge of the table in a precarious position. Precipitate. Cause an event or situation, typically one that is undesirable, to happen suddenly. Drinking in excess will precipitate liver disease. Or, bringing up politics will usually precipitate an argument in their house. Preclude. Prevent from happening or arising, make impossible. For example, your role in this project precludes your involvement in any others. So maybe this project is taking a lot of time and focus and energy, so it prevents you from being involved in any other ones. Or, unfortunately, taking a player out of the game precludes returning him later. So once you take him out, you're prevented from putting him back. Precursor. So this is a similar thing that happened or existed before something else, and it leads to the new thing, so it indicates the approach of something or someone else. For example, sulfur dioxide is the main precursor of acid rain, so it leads to it. Or the exciting beginning of the movie was just a precursor to even more excitement later on. Presage, something that shows the future or the future event. According to the psychic, the cards presage an upcoming tragedy in my life. Or her presidency presages a new era of hope. Prescient, having or showing knowledge of events before they take place. The psychic's predictions were uncannily prescient and ended up proving true a few weeks later. Or, your questions about the safety of the house were prescient as it proved to have an unstable foundation. So showing as if having knowledge of something to happen in the future. Prevalent. This is an adjective which means very common or frequent. So during the holidays, theft becomes more prevalent in low-income areas. Or, raccoons are prevalent in this area and often raid people's garbage cans. Primitive, belonging to the early stages, often of civilization. For example, primitive humans quickly learned how to manipulate tools. Or, his first few drawings were quite primitive, but he improved quickly. Pristine, clean and unused, unspoiled, or in its original condition. My uncle's antique car is pristine and has all its original parts, so shiny, new, and clean. Or, I recommend this cleaning service because they always leave my house pristine. Prosaic, not challenging, dull, unimaginative, and lacking excitement. Edward was a prosaic man who stood out in a room filled with creative people. Or, the first few songs she wrote were prosaic, but she quickly improved. Proscribe. Now, this is not prescribe, that's a different word. It differs just by one letter, but this is proscribe, which means forbid, especially by law. So, most states have laws that proscribe texting while driving. Another example, my doctor has proscribed alcohol for the next couple of weeks, so doesn't want me to do it. Prose, this is the ordinary form of spoken or written language, and this is in contrast usually to poetry. While I am good at writing verses, I prefer to tell my stories through prose. Or, although known as a poet, she also wrote excellent prose. Protean, able to do many different things, versatile, or it sort of means like changing shape, or it could. For example, he is a protean stylist who can move from blues to ballads to grand symphony. Another example, Leonardo da Vinci was a protean figure during the Renaissance. Protract, this means prolong, make something longer. Sarah protracted her presentation with more materials and examples. Or the meeting was so protracted that many people got up and left. Prudent. This means showing good judgment in avoiding risks and uncertainties. Careful. Children must be prudent while riding the bicycles. Or it would be prudent to save some money for the future. Punctilious. This is kind of like prudent, but it's more in the specifics of what you're doing. So you're being very careful in behaving correctly or paying attention to details. For example, he is a punctilious artist, so really pays attention. Or the servant was always punctilious and pleased his master. Quixotic. This means impractical or unrealistic. So usually you have sort of a dream or a project maybe. Children love the quixotic story of the unicorn. Or he has a rather quixotic notion of ending world hunger. Rancor, a feeling of hate and continuing anger, usually about something in the past. She is a strict disciplinarian, and her rancor is obvious if anyone is late. Or there was always an air of rancor at their home since nobody got along. Recalcitrant. This means stubbornly resistant to authority or control. The bull was so recalcitrant to his new owner. Or the babysitter dreaded going to that house because of the recalcitrant children. Recapitulate. To summarize or state again the main point. The manager recapitulated the tasks at the end of the meeting. Another example. At the end of his lectures, he always recapitulates the important takeaways. Redundant. This means in excess or unnecessary repetition. There will be so many redundant employees in the future, so not needed, extra. Or, at the risk of being redundant, I want to once again remind you to be careful. Reflexive. This is said of a sudden reaction that you can't control, like a knee-jerk reaction. Whenever she sees cats, she screams reflexively. Right? Just think of it as like a reflex. So another example might be, he had a reflexive dislike of authority. Reluctant, not eager to do something. A lot of people are reluctant to eat broccoli. Or, I'm reluctant to go to that town since I had a bad experience there. Replete, full or well supplied with something. The animal's den was replete with food stored for the winter. Or, the king's chambers were replete with the finest gold and other ornamentation. Resurgence, bringing again into activity and prominence. The cause of the resurgence of the company was its new CEO. Or there was a brief resurgence of the disease, and then it went away for good. Reticent, remaining silent or self-restraint. You see this word used as though it means hesitant, but it doesn't. Reticent means staying quiet, not wanting to talk. My brother decided to be reticent after he was embarrassed by what he said. Or, I am usually reticent in groups, but I enjoy talking to people one-on-one. Sacrosanct. You see the word sacred kind of hiding in there, which is a good way to remember this. It means extremely holy. Religious temples are sacrosanct in every religion. And then you could also use it in a similar way, but not exactly in the religious context, but with a similar connotation in a sentence like, His workspace was sacrosanct, and no one was allowed near his desk. So in his eyes, it was as if it were holy. Salient, noticeable, or remarkable. The company succeeded because of several salient contributions by key employees. So these really stood out. Or, I didn't think he would be much help at the meeting, but he made several salient points which contributed a lot. Salutary means beneficial to health. Doctors suggest us to eat fruits because they are salutary. It doesn't have to be health. It could just be beneficial in general. So her presence as the new manager had a salutary effect on the sales branch. To shun. It's a verb. It means to avoid or stay away from deliberately. For example, some employees shun work. Or, I shun caffeine after 4 p.m. because it always keeps me up at night. Specious. Seeming to be right or true, but wrong or false. Most magic tricks are specious. Or, on closer inspection, I found all his arguments to be specious. Spontaneous, instinctive, unplanned. It just means happening in the moment without any planning. For example, my dance is spontaneous whenever I hear my favorite song. Or, allowing yourself to be spontaneous makes life fun. Spurious. False, artificial, intended to deceive. The man tried to use spurious currency. Or, you could say, he has made several spurious claims to the insurance company. Subtle. Subtle means not very noticeable or obvious. For example, you can see with these two green colors here, there's just a subtle difference between them. There are many subtle colors which we cannot differentiate normally. Or, there was a subtle shift in her tone which made me think she was starting to like me. Superficial. This means just existing or occurring on the surface, so not deep and not meaningful. The storm caused only superficial damage to the building. Or you could say, his kindness was superficial and just designed to get ahead. So he wasn't deeply and truly kind. Superfluous. This means unnecessary or extra or more than enough. For example, the purple piece of the puzzle is superfluous. You see the other pieces fit together, that one's just not needed. Another example might be, the editor wisely cut all superfluous remarks. Supplant. This means to supersede or replace. For example, in the future, autonomous cars will supplant all taxi drivers. So they'll take the place of. What's another example? Her innovative ideas helped supplant old methods and improve the company's efficiency. Suppress. This means to forcefully put an end to or sort of squash down. Most capitalists suppress lower class people. Another example might be, I managed to suppress my feelings of anger until I left the room. Surreptitious. Done secretly without anyone seeing or knowing. Ninjas are surreptitious as they work at night mostly. Or, he surreptitiously snuck back into his bedroom through the window. Susceptible. Liable to be influenced or harmed by something. For example, most people are susceptible to heat stroke. So they're sort of vulnerable to it, or they could get it. Another example might be, I knew she was mean and I was no longer susceptible to her criticism, so it no longer influenced me. Tedious. Tedious means long, dull, tiresome, boring. I had a very tedious day in the office. Or, it was a long, tedious drive through hundreds of miles of featureless desert. Tenacity. The quality or fact of being determined or persistent. Tenacity can help you overcome every difficulty. Or, he worked at the problem with great tenacity, and after a week, he had solved it. Tendentious. Expressing or supporting a particular opinion that many other people disagree with. So you could sort of remember that as like tendency. You have a tendency towards something. You're making an argument. Some books used to be banned because of their tendentious content. Or, he pretended to be neutral, but his books were always tendentious. Tenuous. Weak, unimportant, or in doubt. The rope became so tenuous that a slight pull could break it. Or, he has only a tenuous hold on the facts and cannot be trusted. Tepid, moderately warm, or showing little enthusiasm. So tepid can mean literally just a little bit warm, sort of physically that's how it feels, or more sort of abstractly, just showing little enthusiasm. So most people can only drink tepid beverages, so that refers to the actual temperature. Or, I only had a tepid interest in the conversation and left as soon as I could. Timid, showing fear or lack of confidence. Most of our pets are timid around street dogs. Or, at first he was timid in the new school, but he quickly gained friends and confidence. Transcend. This means to go beyond the standard limit of something, or can have the connotation of rising above and sort of looking out over whatever you used to be sort of trapped in, so to speak. For example, sometimes we need to transcend our self-interest for a greater cause. Another example, if you can transcend your sense of hurt, you might see that he was just trying to help. So rise above. Transitory, not permanent. Running too much can cause transitory knee pain. So that means it's just kind of passing through and it will go away. Or after a transitory storm, the weather went back to sunny and warm. Trenchant. This means insightful, clear, or deep. You might remember the deep part by the word trench kind of hiding in that word. Trench, deep, insightful. Trenchant. For example, the young scientist was shattered by the trenchant criticism. Or, she had several trenchant insights into the problem, which helped us see things more clearly. Trepidation. Trepidation is fear about something unpleasant that might happen. The trepidation of being looted was in my mind all the way home. Or, I walked into the classroom with trepidation, knowing the test would be hard. Trifling. Not worth considering, just some small thing. People think breaking the speed limit is a trifling crime. Or, I made what I thought was a trifling remark, but she got very upset by it. Trigger. To trigger is to make something suddenly happen. So, a little heat can trigger the fire alarm. Or, he is a very angry person and it is easy to trigger his temper. So just to set it off all of a sudden. Trivial, not important or worth considering. So that you can see that's kind of related to the last word. It was utterly ridiculous to cry about something so trivial. Another example. I think your manuscript is almost ready, as it only needs a few trivial changes. Turbulent, not stable or calm, moving around unsteadily. John was on a very turbulent flight last year. Another example, more abstract. They had a turbulent relationship with many arguments, but they loved each other dearly underneath it all. Unassailable, unable to be attacked, questioned, or defeated. So again, this can be more literal, as in the king made an unassailable fort, or it could be more abstract, as in his arguments were unassailable and everybody agreed with his plan of action. Undermine, to weaken or lessen the effectiveness of something. The events of the past year have undermined people's confidence in the government. Or, every time I try to offer a solution, my coworker undermines my efforts. Unfathomable, impossible to understand. Mathematics is unfathomable for some students. Or, it is unfathomable to me that you would vote for such an unstable person. Untenable, incapable of being defended or justified. His position was untenable, and he was forced to quit. So you're in a weak position. The current situation at home is untenable, and I think somebody has to move out. Unwarranted, incapable of being justified or explained. The judge's unwarranted decision forced people to protest, so it could not be justified. Or people thought my optimism was unwarranted, but everything worked out great. Vacillation. This is the inability to decide between different options, or just going back and forth on anything. My vacillation over which offer to accept frustrated my wife. Or he went through much vacillation trying to decide what to major in when he got to college. Vacuous, having or showing a lack of thought or intelligence, mindless. So this comes from the word vacuum, which is empty, so sort of think of it as like an empty-headed. It was a dull and vacuous speech. Another example. I found her book utterly vacuous and could barely get through the first chapter. Vantage, a place or position affording a good view of something. So this could be, like a lot of words, either literal or more abstract. For example, he looked at the past to get a better vantage point about his future. So that's in the abstract. Or from this vantage, things look very positive. Again, that's abstract. Or you could literally be up on a hill with a good vantage of the surrounding countryside. Verisimilitude, the quality of seeming to be true or real. So you could maybe remember this by that similar in the middle there, which means, again, sort of similar to something true or real. For example, the company used original leather to add verisimilitude to the shoes. Another example, the verisimilitude of the movie set to an old western town is amazing. Versatile, able to do many things. She is versatile enough to do all her company's work. Or, he is a versatile actor and can play anything from an innocent young man to a hardened criminal. volatile, likely to change suddenly, easily evaporated at normal temperature. So these are two different aspects of the use of this word. The first one is the abstract one, likely to change suddenly, as in this sentence here. The stock market is a volatile market. Or it could be easily evaporated at normal temperature, meaning like pure alcohol evaporates quite easily, so we could say it's a volatile liquid. Or we could say someone has a volatile temper. And our last word is voluble, which is talking a lot with enthusiasm and fluency. Mrs. Thompson is a voluble and gregarious lady. Or he is usually more voluble after a good meal. So there it is, 244 words. Knowing these words is going to help you a lot on the GRE and in general. So I hope that helped. See you in another video.